Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Gunner class in Deep Rock Galactic, discussing its weapons, tools, loadouts, and how best to play this class. The Gunner is one of 4 playable classes in DRG with a strong emphasis on providing sustained supporting fire and being capable of dealing large amounts of damage relative to other classes. While they possess a substantial amount of firepower, they lack the more unique and flexible mobility options of the other classes. They do have some powerful utility items and can give your mining team a variety of tactical options as the mission plays out. Your principal armament as the Gunner will be the LEADSTORM minigun. It's a 3-barreled Gatling gun capable of firing at 1800 rounds per minute. However, the weapon does take a moment to spin up, meaning it's not very responsive to immediate threats. It does compensate for this by being able to fire continuously from a standard 2400 round belt until you either release the trigger or the weapon eventually overheats. Its overheating mechanic is another Achilles heel for the weapon, but it's definitely necessary to balance the weapon's raw damage output. My recommended loadout for the minigun includes improved motor for increased DPS, either oversized drum for more overall ammo or high velocity rounds for even higher DPS, blow-through rounds for increased ammo efficiency, variable chamber pressure for better sustained DPS, and finally cold as grave, allowing you to maintain fire as long as you keep killing. One important thing to know about the cold as the grave skill is that you don't have to kill hostiles to get the cooldown benefits. Killing neutral creatures, including cave maggots, will still trigger the effect. Gunners can also use the Thunderhead autocannon in lieu of the minigun after reaching level 10 and completing the weapons license assignment. While it lacks the high volume of fire of its counterpart, it makes up for it by having higher damage rounds that deal splash damage to nearby enemies. While the blast radius isn't large, it's enough to deal damage to tightly packed groups of glyphids and help make near misses count for something. With the proper upgrades, it can specialize in dealing lots of area of effect damage or being effective at punching through enemy armor. For our build, we'll be focusing on the autocannon's unique splash damage capabilities. Our first upgrade, increased caliber rounds, will give us improved damage, followed by improved gas system to increase your fire rate and hit probability. The third upgrade will be the high velocity rounds. This will increase direct damage by a significant amount. Shrapnel rounds will be our fourth upgrade, increasing the blast radius of the autocannon by roughly 40%. Finally, feedback loop will round out the build with this weapon, giving it very good sustained fire capabilities. For overclocks, both of the clean overclocks are worthwhile options. However, Carpet Bomber gives the autocannon very good crowd control abilities and only a slight reduction in effective damage. While a big gun may be good in a larger engagement, a good sidearm can be a lifesaver in a pinch. The Gunner by default comes equipped with the BULLDOG heavy revolver, a symbol of authority and the final word in stopping power. While it may lack a generous amount of ammo, it packs a serious punch and is capable of finishing off wounded Praetorians or dealing burst damage to dreadnoughts and oppressors who expose themselves. The biggest drawback to this weapon is that while it may be very convenient to use in a pinch compared to a minigun or autocannon, it's better to save it for targets of opportunity or dire situations thanks to its very small ammo pool. For modifications, I typically like to specialize fully into damage dealing, taking quickfire ejector, increased caliber rounds, hollow points, high velocity rounds, and deadeye. However, I have seen some success taking all expanded ammo bags in lieu of increased damage for a more general purpose sidearm. For overclocks, I would probably recommend sticking only with either chain hit or elephant rounds, although feather trigger and 5-shooter can be useful in the hands of an experienced player. The alternative sidearm for the BULLDOG, available for unlock at level 15, has a much less favorable reputation than the BULLDOG. While it isn't objectively a bad weapon, its burst fire mode, slow sustained fire rate, and low damage make it a tough sell for most players. However, with a little bit of practice and the right upgrades, the burst pistol can be an effective complement to the Gunner, especially when using the autocannon. The learning curve is really focused around predicting the weapon's recoil and tracking moving targets. For upgrades, I like to take high velocity rounds, recoil dampener, increased caliber rounds, hollow point rounds, and burst damage. As you can see, a considerable effort went into increasing the weapon's damage, and with all these upgrades, you can reliably get 1 burst kills on most weaker enemies. When it comes to overclocking the weapon, I would probably stick with composite casing, giving you more ammo and a faster fire rate, or full chamber seal, increasing damage and reload speed. Other overclocks tend to undermine the weapon's strengths, unfortunately, a little bit more than I'd like. The gunner also has access to some of the most powerful grenades in the game in terms of raw killing potential. The sticky grenade, while lagging behind some of the other options in power, makes up for it with a higher grenade count and the ability to be stuck on surfaces and enemies. Incendiary grenades, while not dealing a lot of direct damage, can immolate a large group of enemies or block a narrow choke point. The cluster grenade is an extremely powerful tool if used correctly and can put a huge dent into a swarm of glyphids. It will take a bit of practice to get used to, as the bomblets released from the grenades can not always behave in a predictable way. Looking at the gunner in its totality, it's obvious that it has a strong emphasis on damage dealing capabilities and sustained engagement compared to other classes. It's important to leverage these traits during a mission, as opposed to trying to mitigate some of its weaknesses. Typically, I like to run the minigun and BULLDOG revolver, and will use sticky grenades on lower hazard levels since enemy clusters tend to be smaller. On Haz 4 or 5, or when doing a deep dive, I usually swap out for the cluster or incendiary grenade, as they can handle the bigger groups of enemies a little bit more effectively. While the gunner may have an emphasis on killing power, it also has some pretty handy tools that can help out quite a lot. First, the ZIPLINE gun allows you and other non-scout classes to navigate more obtuse caverns more easily. They're also particularly useful in a Quark and Egg missions, as scouts won't be able to carry these heavier items while using their grappling hook. I've also seen people use these as ways of avoiding being hit by melee enemies. However, Macteras and other ranged enemies can quickly put this cheesy strategy to an end. The shield generator is also one of my favorite gadgets in DRG, and acts both as a defensive and a roundabout offensive tool. When playing defense, it can absorb damage and keep most bugs back, while still allowing your team to fight. Against Mactera swarms, this can be pretty important, as a dozen or so of them can spit out quite a bit of damage. The shield also recharges players' shields and allows them to step back into the fray sooner if needed. The shield also works well if a player is downed, or if you're about to go down with Iron Will. Simply throw a shield down and either revive the downed player, or wait for a teammate to come save the day. The final trick I have for the shield is a way to tank aggro from bosses, especially the Dreadnought. Simply wait for the Dread to focus on you, throw a shield down, and watch as he helplessly tries to attack you, while your teammates have free reign over his aft section. The gadgets for the gunner have unfortunately far less flash than other perks, but nonetheless are extremely powerful tools. I have saved many games using the shield alone to revive teammates during a full squad wipe with Iron Will. Some important considerations for the gunner include that it will likely be the slowest class due to its weapon mechanics and lack of mobility increasing gadgets like the grappling hook, drills, or platforms. In addition, the gunner should be, in most cases, the primary source of sustained DPS or damage. During swarms, they should be focusing on the bulk of the enemies, not on killing swarmers and hatchlings. If playing as the gunner, you'll want to have a good team with good communication, as getting separated will do neither you nor your team any favors. Remember that you do have a sidearm that's well suited for precision long-range engagements as well. If you are playing with a gunner, be considerate of the class's limitations, especially when it comes to speed and terrain negotiation. Just because you can grapple up anywhere, it doesn't mean your gunner can. Also, be very careful of walking in front of gunners during swarms. The class functions best when it can sustain prolonged firing with its primary weapons, and interrupting that weakens the class. Thankfully, the essentials for the class are readily advertised by its name and demeanor, and is one of the easier classes to learn for a newer player in my opinion. Overall, the gunner is an essential part of any team, and is hard to substitute with a duplicate of another class. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think of the gunner and how you like to play him in the comments section below. Check out my community page to vote on what we'll be covering next in the next episode. But until then, happy hunting, miners.
No! Does that count?
No.
That might count. I got completed.